Not every test gives you clarity. Some tests just give you anxiety and better vocabulary. We need to talk about overtesting, genetic testing, methylation testing, Dutch tests, biological age testing, microbiome testing, food sensitivity testing, hormone patterns, cortisol curves, detox panels, longevity panels. And every month, some influencer gets online and says, "This is the test everyone needs. This is the gold standard. You cannot optimize your health without this. If you do not test this, you're just guessing." And it sounds intelligent. It sounds advanced. It sounds personalized. But sometimes it's not personalized medicine. Sometimes it's just expensive anxiety. Let me be very clear. Testing is not bad. Testing can be extremely useful. It can reveal patterns, catch disease, help monitor risks. It can guide treatment, and it can protect patients from guessing. But a test is only useful if it answers a real clinical question. At Praxis, we don't ask, what test can we run? We ask, what decision will this test change? That is the first filter. If answer is nothing, then the test may not be helpful right now. It may be interesting, it may be educational, it may be marketable, it may make a great social media post, but interesting is not the same as clinically useful. And this is where people get hurt. Not always just physically, but mentally. People get a genetic test and suddenly think they're broken. They get a methylation report and think their DNA is failing. They get a biological age score and think they are dying faster than everyone else. They get a hormone panel and think every number needs correction. They get a Dutch test and think one metabolite explains their entire life. They get a microbiome test and think every bacterial ratio needs a supplement. Now, their health is no longer a pattern. It becomes a panic project. And this is not medicine, Gary Bracca. That is fear-based optimization. One of the biggest problems with influencer medicine is false certainty. Someone says, this test is the gold standard. The gold standard for what? For diagnosis? For screening? For monitoring? For research? For risk prediction? For hormone metabolism? For treatment decision? For one specific condition? For the general population? Because a test can be useful in one context and very misleading in another. That's the Praxis lens. Context determines meaning. Take genetic testing. Genetic testing can be very powerful when it's used correctly. Family history, cancer risk syndromes, pharmacogenetics, known inherited conditions, carrier screening, cardiovascular risks in some selected cases. But direct-to-consumer testing can also create confusion. A variant is not always a diagnosis. A risk marker is not destiny. A methylation gene does not automatically mean you need a cabinet full of supplements. And S&P, or a single nucleotide polymorphism, isn't a treatment plan. Genes are not commands. They're probabilities, tendencies, susceptibilities, and context-dependent signals. The question is, does this result match the patient's history, their labs, their symptoms, their family risk, and the clinical picture? Or do we just create a label with no useful decision? Now, take hormone testing. Hormones matter, but hormones are dynamic. They pulse, they fluctuate, they follow rhythms. They respond to sleep, stress, calories, training, medications, cycle phase, inflammation, insulin, illness, and timing. So if someone says one advanced hormone test tells the whole story, be careful. A Dutch test may be useful in selective context. Serum testing may be useful in selected contexts. Saliva testing, again, may be useful in selected contexts. But none of them magically replace clinical reasoning. The test is not the diagnosis. The test is data, and data still needs interpretation. Now, take biological age testing. This is one of the biggest anxiety machines in longevity right now. People get a number. You are biologically 47. You're biologically 31. You age 6 years. You reverse 3 years. And people start treating the number like a final judgment on their life. But biological age testing is not an evolving field. Different clocks can give different answers. Different labs may use different methods. Different markers may reflect different parts of aging biology. Inflammation, stress, sleep, exercise, immune status, and recent illness may influence results. So the question's not, what is my biological age? The better question is, what actual pattern does this test reveal that I can measure again in a meaningful way? If the result does not change your plan, your behavior, your monitoring, or your medical decision making, then it may just be a very expensive source of stress. This is where Praxis is different. We simplify before we complicate. We ask, what is your chief concern? What is the timeline? What changed before the symptoms started? What red flags? What are the basic labs? What are the foundations? What pattern is repeating? What has already been tried? What decisions are we trying to make? Then, and only then, do we ask, what test would clarify the next decision? Not the fanciest test, not the trendiest test, not the test an influencer is selling. The test that changes the next step. That is how testing should work. Testing should reduce uncertainty and should help prioritize. Testing should confirm or challenge a hypothesis. Testing should monitor safety. Testing should track response. Testing should tell us whether the system is moving. Testing should not turn every patient into a frightened detective trying to decode 200 markers with no context. In peptide medicine, this matters even more because people are already overwhelmed. They want to know, what peptide should I take? But then they're told, before you do anything, get genetics, get hormonal, get a biological age test, get methylation, get stool testing, cortisol testing, micronutrient testing, mold testing, get peptide panels. And suddenly, the patient has already spent thousands of dollars before anyone has explained the pattern. That's backwards. The Praxis order is much different. Pattern first, then question, then test, then interpretation, then decision, then monitoring. Not testing for entertainment, not testing for fear, not testing because an influencer made it sound mandatory. A test should serve the patient. The patient should not become a servant to the test. This does not mean we are ignoring advanced testing. Advanced testing can be very powerful. Advanced testing does not always mean appropriate. And simple does not mean inferior. Sometimes the most useful data is basic. Fasting insulin, glucose, A1C, home IR, lipids, liver enzymes, CBC, CMP, ferritin, B12, vitamin D testing, TSH, free T4, inflammatory markers, waist circumference, blood pressure, sleep quality, resting heart rate, HRV, strength, energy, cycle, pain, recovery, symptom timing. Those aren't flashy, but they often tell the real story. Because medicine is not about collecting the most data. It's about asking the best questions. So here's the standard I want patients, students, and clinicians to use. Before ordering any tests, ask, number one, what clinical question am I trying to answer? Number two, will this result change the plan? Number 3, has this test validated for the purpose that I'm using it for? Number 4, could this result create anxiety without action? Number 5, do I have the ability to interpret it correctly? Number 6, how will I monitor the outcome after the intervention? If you cannot answer those questions, pause, because more testing is not automatically better medicine. Sometimes more testing is just more noise, and noise creates fear. Fear creates overtreatment. Overtreatment creates confusion. Confusion creates more testing. That becomes a feedback loop, the testing anxiety loop, and many people are stuck in that. Test, panic, supplement, retest. Panic again, add more, change more, buy more, track more, still no clarity. That's not health optimization. That's health obsession. The Praxis lens breaks that loop. We use testing to clarify the pattern, not replace the pattern. We use testing to guide decisions, not create identity. We use testing to monitor response, not manufacture fear. We use testing as a tool, not a religion. So the next time someone tells you this test is the gold standard, ask, gold standard for what decision, in what population, for what condition, compared to what reference, validated by whom, and what changes if it's abnormal? Because if they can't answer that, they're not practicing advanced medicine. They're selling certainty, and certainty sells, but clarity heals. That's the Praxis standard. Not anti-testing, anti-noise. Not anti-advanced medicine, anti-fear-based medicine. Test less randomly, interpret better, monitor smarter, and never let a lab report convince you that you're more broken than your actual pattern shows.